Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Happy Hanukkah. So there's a famous story. It's not clear how old it is, but it's a story about two brothers who loved each other very much, who cared about each other. They were both farmers. Their fields were next to each other. One of them had a wife and a whole bunch of children, and the other was single. And the single one reasoned that the one who had the wife and the children needed more food, so he got up in the middle of the night and he took some grain from his pile and brought it to his brother's pile. And an hour or so later, the other brother reasoned, my poor brother is single, he doesn't have as much help on the farm, I'm going to help him out. Took a whole bunch of grain, brought it over to his brother's pile. And this happens a few nights in a row, until one night, for whatever reason, they both got up at the same time, and they met in the middle of their fields, and they were each carrying the piles, and they realized that they loved each other so much that they were each trying to help each other, and they embraced and they celebrated their brotherly love. And according to this tradition, years later, the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was built on that spot where the brothers embraced. So there's a modern version of the story. Two brothers that don't get along, and they resent each other, and the single brother says, I don't have as much help. I need to avail myself of some of the grain from my brother's field. So he gets up in the middle of the night and he takes some of the grain from his brother's pile and he brings it over to his pile. And his other brother says, what does he need all of this grain for? He's single, so he gets up in the middle of the night, takes from the pile, brings it over to his pile. And this goes on for several nights. And then one night, they catch each other in the middle. They realize what's going on, that each is trying to take from the other. They're resentful. They get into an argument. And according to tradition, years later, that's where the Knesset was built. Now, I don't have to tell you that there are times when, as Jewish people, brothers and sisters, we get along and we love each other, and our regard for each other overwhelms our resentment. And there are times when our resentment can overwhelm our regard for each other. So I wanted to just take a moment to explicate this morning's story, which is, of course, a story about brothers. And it is really fascinating that this is the story that we read on Hanukkah, even though, again, the Torah precedes the Hanukkah story by centuries. So we know that Joseph aroused the resentment of his brothers, and that his brothers were jealous of him, put him into a pit, sold him into slavery. And then, as we read this morning, there is the moment when the brothers go down to Egypt because they need the services of this individual who turns out to be their brother. They don't realize that. At many points in the story, they say to each other, this is happening to us because of how poorly we treated our brother Joseph. We never should have done this. And of course, Joseph hears all of that. What is clear initially is how much the brothers need Joseph. What becomes clear, because it's not so clear initially, is how much Joseph needs his brothers. There are these beautiful, poignant scenes that are described. There's one scene which describes how they ate. And the Torah says, Vayasimu lo levado, velahem levadam, that he ate by himself and they ate by themselves. The Egyptians didn't want to eat with Joseph. Why? Because he was a Hebrew. So even though he rose very high, and even though the king said, you're going to be my second in command, the Egyptians never fully accepted him because he was a Hebrew. So here is this poor guy. He is alienated from his brothers. He's not fully accepted by the society in which he lives, in which he's actually helping, and he realizes in that moment just how much he needs them. And there is a very poignant moment in the story where he accuses his brothers of being spies, and they say, no, we're not spies. We came down here because we need food. And then they say, Kulanu b'nei ish echad nachnu. We are all the children of the same father. Now, what did they mean by that? On the face of it, they were saying, we, talking to you, all belong to the same family. But Rashi, following on an earlier Midrashic tradition, says that they had Ruach HaKodesh. They had this kind of inspiration, and they were unwittingly including him and saying, all of us are children of the same father. If you look at it from a psychoanalytical perspective, you could say that they understood subconsciously a reality that they didn't fully appreciate consciously until later. So these are brothers whose resentment certainly has gotten the better of them, but then there are moments when they come to understand that their need for each other is great, that their connection to each other outweighs or should outweigh whatever resentment they have. So I want to share with you a contemporary situation which very much illustrates this point. So the kibbutzim that were attacked, where massacres occurred on October 7th, 2023, many of them are secular kibbutzim. Many of the people belonging there would consider their politics to be left of center. And so what happened on that day in the afternoon is that two brothers from the community of Otniel, which is a settler community, and they would consider their politics to be right of center. These two brothers said, we need to go and help. We need to go because they heard what was going on at these kibbutzim. So these two individuals, Rabbi Menachem Kalmanson and his brother Elchanan, they left their community. They went to kibbutz Be'eri, and they were responsible for helping to save the lives of over 100 people on that day. And a year later, there was a gathering in Sderot, sponsored by the kibbutz movement, and there was a discussion that took place between Rabbi Menachem Kalmanson and a woman by the name of Nili Bar Sini. Now, it turns out that Rabbi Kalmanson's brother was actually killed the next day, trying to defend and successfully defending the lives of so many of these people. But at this gathering, Rabbi Kalmanson was speaking, and he said, you know, many people from my community asked me throughout the year, why did you go and help the people in the kibbutz? Why go rescue those people? And here's what he said. That question really angers me. When we went to Be'eri, we didn't feel like we were going to a place that was different from our own. We went to help our people. For me, we are one. Our internal conflicts can seem, for me, we are one people on a shared path. How this path unfolds, whether as a fateful alliance or as a shared destiny, is our challenge to resolve. And then Nili Bar Sini expressed her gratitude to Rabbi Kalmanson, and she said to him, you were there without the army. When we were left to our fate, you entered and exited and rescued people. You chose to do that. Now, to the extent that you understand Israeli politics, to the extent that you understand the animosity that Israelis will often express regarding people who do not have their views, you understand just how unusual and how precious this moment was. Two individuals saying, in effect, we understand, despite our differences, that we have a very strong connection to each other. And Rabbi Kalmanson went on, and this is really quite moving and quite spectacular. He said, there are so many similarities between the kibbutz and my settlement. No one knows addresses. Everyone knows everyone. Be'eri, the kibbutz, represents community, support, and a strong work ethic, just like my community of Otniel. So I share this because this is an instance of brothers and sisters that are able to get past the resentment and able to understand that what unites us the challenges that unite us, but also the mission that unites us is so incredibly strong and needs to transcend the differences. So I started with two stories, a story about brothers whose love wins out, and a story about brothers whose resentment wins out. And I'm here to say in the Shabbat of Hanukkah that we need to do whatever we can to make sure that that first story is what carries the day. The story of brothers and sisters who understand the power of our shared mission and our shared destiny. And so I want us to ask ourselves the question, what does it take to get us to the place of kulanu b'nei ish echad nachnu? What does it take to get us to the place of recognizing that we are all children of the same ancestor, brothers and sisters? We have common enemies, and we have a shared destiny. I hope that on this holiday of lights, on this holiday of miracles, we will unlock the power of our brotherhood and our sisterhood. Shabbat Shalom.